Cool. All right, so it's 4 a.m. on a Sunday, the deployment hour. You've been prepping for this one for a while. Your team have some big features going in. There are 22 people on the call, and you're pretty sure 16 of them are asleep because they are product owners. So you're taking a sip of your coffee and you announce, and now I'm going to click the deploy button. When suddenly Adam pipes up, stop. What is it this time? No, Gabriel forgot to get that critical bug tested. You know, the one where the button was 4 pixels to the left of where it's supposed to be? Well, that's it. That's untested code. No go. Everyone's features, everyone on that call gets held up because of 4 pixels. That's just how it goes when you all deploy to one application, right? Hi, I'm Tiané Erwee, software engineer with BBD since 2018. I've been working on front end since I started, primarily Angular stacks. There was this brief moment where I worked with WebSphere, but honestly, who builds front ends in Java? Sometimes I dabble in data science, but today I'm here as a front end developer. Now I have a confession to make. That's not my story. I mean, I've never been on production support in my career. I've deployed to production. I took a baby application and launched it into the world, never to be seen again, landing at someone else's harbor. So in my world, nothing ever breaks because I've never been woken up by a production incident. All the automation testing and unit testing I put in has always done its job, right? Fine. So let me use an analogy of something I'm a bit more familiar with then, making a poster in school. I too was once a child. So we need to make a poster of how excited we are for the Rugby World Cup or something, I don't know, to show our parents what bright little stars we are. So we all have one piece of cardboard and we need to work on it at the same time. There are always the archetypes. You know, the kids who are too cool to actually put in any effort, the kids with helicopter parents who know that everything's going to be done for them, the way too serious kids who treats every project like their entire school career depends on it. And then the kids sitting in the corner, putting wood glue on their fingers and peeling it off because it feels cool. Now, if you know me, this won't be a surprise, but I was the way too serious kid, a perfectionist ball of anxiety. And working with everyone like this was not the vibe. It's chaos. Kids are crying because you're drawing in my space and there's glitter and pipe cleaners everywhere and a teacher desperately trying to hurt cats. This is my personal nightmare. Now, it doesn't matter how quickly you finish your work. You've got to wait for Bianca to stick her 2004 piece of glitter, for George's mom to drop off his custom cut foam paper, and for Jimmy to stop sticking wood glue on his fingers and stick it on the macaroni instead. I would much prefer the alternative, where we all get our own pieces of cardboard and our own markers and our own space, so that we can finish at our pace and stick the poster up where we think it belongs. But now we have a problem. The parents no longer get to go to one place to find the signature squiggle of their little angel. No, now they need to go to multiple areas to find the right one. Our parents are the users. Now we have two options. We present everything in one big application for the user's convenience. One piece of cardboard, everybody working together. Or we make the user bookmark 9 pages because it's easier for developers to manage their own applications. There's always a compromise. But we can get clever, can't we? We can each make our own poster and then just stick them all on one wall, right? We can take this big application with everything bundled in and split it up into smaller applications, but still present it to the user as one. Enter micro frontends. Now, it's a simple concept. Take these huge monoliths and break them into smaller, easily manageable chunks. So in 2011, something great happened for developers, back-end developers. Microservices started popping up. Giants such as Netflix and Amazon were leading the way. So we went from these huge monoliths to individualized services that can and should exist independent of each other, but still be consumed together, easier to manage. Happy days, right? But the front end was lagging behind. So they were looking at the situation hella jelly, like, why can't we have nice things? So here's our timeline. In 2011, microservices popped into the scene. A whole 5 years went by before micro front ends started entering the conversation. We're seeing an approach emerge that our teams call micro front ends. In this approach, a web application is broken up by its pages and features, with each feature being owned end-to-end by a single team. Wow, this is a revolutionary concept. Never heard anything like it before, right? Now, at this point, we start looking at frameworks like Bit and Single Spar. Now, these two follow two very different patterns when it came to micro front ends. Bit followed the component-based pattern, and Single Spar the application-based pattern. Component-based is when each team builds their features as individual bits of code, called components. These are then packaged, published, and consumed by a parent application, which is then served up to the user. Application-based is when each team builds their features as individual applications. These are then either injected or routed and served to the user as one. Not iframes, I repeat, not iframes. No iframes here. And then we hit 2020. There was a paradigm shift. People who worked in a co-located office 5 days a week now found themselves home alone. Communication and collaboration had become harder than ever, and the need for teams to be independent became undeniable. Luckily for us, in October of 2020, the Module Federation package for Webpack was released, and this one was a game changer. A plugin for the most widely used bundler, teams can now easily implement a micro front-end framework without needing to opt into an entire framework. Now, this wasn't new, as I literally just explained, but what was really cool about this was you could just easily implement this into existing applications. So if you were one of those projects with all of your posters stuck all around the room, you could just switch out your press stick for thumbtacks and move it all to one wall. Very cool. So if Module Federation was released in 2020, why am I talking about it now? Well, I was also curious about that. So I thought maybe it was like beta issues when I was introduced with it in November of 2021. So I asked ChatGPT when Webpack 5 was out of beta. As of my last knowledge update in September 2021, Webpack 5 had not yet been officially released. However, plans and developments in the software world can change rapidly. I recommend checking the official Webpack website, blog, or GitHub repository for the most up-to-date information on the release status of Webpack 5 and whether it has exited the beta phase. I checked. That's not true. It was out of beta. So that's not it. Okay, so if it wasn't the actual release date, what else held me up? Well, we used Angular, and Angular 11 was still on experimental support for Webpack 5. Angular 12, which did have production support for Webpack 5, was only released in May of 2021. So November 2021 gave it 6 months to be tested, and yeah, that means it's production, aka enterprise, ready. And that was when I was introduced to it. We had some familiar requirements: a large application, multiple teams, each in need of separate release cadences. As a bonus feature, we got to incorporate existing applications into our new one, so that made business very happy. So we opted to start out with Module Federation. So we started with static Module Federation, which is basically where when you're building an application, in the config, you define the declarations for which remotes or micro frontends you want to pull in. And these declarations are then packaged and bundled with our shell, and then these remotes are then pulled at runtime. However, that's not great because every time you want to add or remove a micro frontend, you need to rebuild your application. What we wanted instead was to just package our shell by itself, no knowledge of what was going to happen around it, and then at runtime, define which remotes it wants to pull in. That way, we only needed to redeploy a config instead of rebuild an entire application. So now it's 2022, and we've ditched the static and put in the dynamic module federation. We've even generated our menu from this declaration because, yeah, it's nice if your entry points are also then defined by what's available. But there was still something else I wanted to do. I wanted to generate a dashboard dynamically out of remotes as well. And yeah, I couldn't really do that until Angular 14 was released in June of 2022. And then that happened, but then I couldn't do 2 escape talks, which brings us to now, where I do have an application, of course, with a dynamic menu and a dynamic dashboard, all built up at runtime out of different applications. More on that in a bit. So how does Module Federation give us these awesome things? Well, how it works is remotes are set up to bundle specific modules and components into a JavaScript file, usually called remoteentry.js. The application is then deployed as usual and used the way it always has been. The shell application then fetches this remoteentry.js file and loads them up as if they were a part of the shell application. But the cool thing is not just importing the apps at runtime, it is also sharing dependencies in the browser. Also, the remote is loaded as a part of the shell application, so it's sharing the same cookies and local storage and session storage. Now, I didn't just come with a history lesson. I brought a demo too, with some friends, Amy, Tori, and unfortunately, Lucas couldn't make it because the only live talk in Netherlands is happening right now, and that's where he's sitting, so I wasn't gonna make him miss it. So what they're gonna be doing is deploying without talking to each other to an application, helping me out with my demo. So no one's gonna say, and now I'm gonna click the deploy button. Now this won't come as a surprise to you, but I love Lego. So I built a Lego wishlist and inventory manager because I'm tired of building notes and to-do apps, aren't you? All right. So this is the application. Actually, it's beautiful. Love the shades of gray. So what we're going to do is we're going to implement our first feature, inventory. So I'm just going to refresh here and hopefully the cache is invalidated. There we go. We've got our inventory list. So let's just add a few things there. My bonsai tree. And also, what else do I have? Orchid. All right, very cool. So I promise you this is its own application. We didn't just redeploy the same thing and go like, oh, it's updated, yay. So I'm actually gonna go to the inventory list itself. I do promise you this is a different URL. But yeah, you can see it's exactly the same application and you can use it exactly the same way, but they exist in different areas. But now it's all good and well to keep track of what you have, but we need to keep track of what we want, right? Because we need to buy more. So we're going to add our second feature, wish list. Hopefully that cache invalidates real quick. And there we have it. We have our wish list feature. So it looks basically the same on the tile because I basically use the same code. But so let's add some stuff to our wish list. So I don't know if you guys have seen the Rivendell set, but it looks sick. It really does. And then also the tranquil garden. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you the shared state thing. So what I did, and don't actually do this, it's just a good way to show up doing this, is I shared the ngxs module and I injected the same store into both standalone components. So I'm going to move something from my wish list to my inventory without making a get call. So you can see here that they are sharing the same state. Oh, apparently I need it. It's gone. It's gone. Okay, cool. We'll just look at the network tab then. Anyways, it's the same thing. I'm going to click on the Tranquil Garden because I did actually buy it. And you will see a service call, which is a post call, but no get call from the inventory side because that singleton module is actually shared. So you can share state between applications, even though just remember these are two completely separately deployed things living in different areas of the world. Okay, now that that's working, let's add profile because we all forget what we look like and what our names are. So we need to be constantly reminded by a picture and some text. So yay, refresh time. And oh, okay. So it seems my my friends over here were not quite happy with my demo. It seems it was a little boring for them. I love this spinning cat. It's absolutely fantastic. So clearly they've decided to deploy right now. But yeah, let's just go look at profile. And oh no, it's not working. I'm so surprised. But this allows me to tell you about another thing of Module Federation, which is compartmentalized points of failure. So just because the profile application goes down doesn't mean the rest of the applications need to suffer. They're all fine. So, okay. Talk's title, little bit clickbaity. The real title is your teams don't need to talk to each other, but things go wrong, and communication is a really important tool to sort that out. So, I don't know, sue me, I had a character limit. So what I'm going to do is say, pretty please, Tori, will you fix profile wherever you are sitting? And then I'm going to obsessively refresh every 2 seconds to make sure that it's working. And she fixed it with not my face and not my name. Thank you, Tori. And thank you, Amy. And thank you, Lucas and Spirit. All right. So that was cool. How did we do that, though? What's off? Oh. How do we set up the remotes? First things first, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants here. I made use of the Angular Architects Module Federation package to get me started. This package ships with a bunch of useful things, like functions to use in your Angular code to load up remote modules, functions to use in your Webpack config to easily share dependencies with extras like versions, and it even comes which you can use on your existing Angular application with ng-add to set it up for Module Federation in like a few minutes, and then you have to make minor changes once the config file is generated. I highly suggest reading the series of articles by Manfred Steyer on their website. There's a QR code. So what will our Webpack config look like for our remotes? Well, that's basically it. You need to provide certain things. Firstly, a unique name for your application to prevent clashes between different modules trying to be loaded under the same name. You also need to provide the actual Module Federation plugin. And this plugin requires 4 different things. First, a name. For Angular, this is the same name as your Angular application name. Secondly, a file name. This is pretty self-explanatory. It's the file name that your actual modules are going to be exported into. And thirdly, exposes, which is an object containing the modules and components that you want to export. So here we see we are exporting the tile.component.ts file as ./tile component, and similarly for the list module. And the fourth thing you need to provide is your list of shared dependencies, which is an object. So this is basically what that looks like. And for each dependency, you need to provide the package name, whether it is a singleton, whether it has a strict version, and what that required version is. Now, this can be automatically detected from your package JSON. It can be a specific version, or it can be a range of versions. The concept of shared dependencies is a standout feature of Module Federation. The application will decide at runtime whether to load up new dependencies or use what's already there. This also means that your remotes are much smaller since they don't come packaged with all of their dependencies. So you can think about it like this. While we're making our poster, we're all sitting around one table. Only one kid needs to get up and fetch the markers. Once they're at the table, we can all use them. So this is what we did when we moved the set from the wish list to the inventory. We shared the ngXS module, which is injected into both standalone components. Now, as I said, this is actually bad practice. It's just an easy way to show you that things are actually shared. So this means the store as a singleton is shared. So when wishlist pushes to the observable, inventory, which is subscribed to that observable, just goes, cool, updated, without needing to do a network call. So a funny story. When I was building this, it wasn't working for like 4 hours, and I was horrendously confused until I realized I forgot to declare the dependency as shared. So that was the entire point of what I was trying to demo. So don't forget to declare what you want to share. Now that we have set up the remotes, such a simple setup, actually. How do we set up the shell? First thing, the Webpack config.js file. Looks mighty familiar, don't you think? Except it just doesn't have that exposes part. Now, you can have bidirectional modules, which both export and import other modules. This one just doesn't do that. And secondly, the shared dependencies object. This one is the same as our remote. However, it doesn't have to be the same. This is a unique declaration per application. Cool, we know how to build. We know how to share dependencies. How do we pull them in? So how this application works is it fetches a JSON file at application start, which contains an array of menu items that define different remotes. The array is then passed into menu objects, and these objects are then either appended to the menu and the root or to the dashboard list. Let's look at the inventory list declaration. This is it. You need to provide it with a few things. Firstly, a router link, the route to where it's actually going to go in the application. The remote entry file, which is the link to where the file is actually existing. The remote name, that unique name that you provided it in the Webpack config. The expose module, the name you assign to the actual file that you're exporting. And then the ng module name, the Angular module name. These models are then loaded up at runtime and appended as lazy loaded routes to the router module config. So the key function to note here is the load remote module function. This is a helper function provided by the Angular Architects Module Federation package. And basically what it does is it initializes the Webpack container and the sharing context for the remote. The inventory tile, basically exactly the same. And this is how we load this one up. We see the same load remote module function to fetch the code, but then we programmatically append it to the DOM. We don't add it to the roots. This also gives us something nice because we can show a loading state when the remote is loading and also an error state if it fails. But what if the module fails to root? So we saw in the application that this happens with profile. So we can go down the route of adding a catch statement here so that it's like try, catch, go to this missing front-end module. But what happens is the Angular router then resolves the route that you assign to that micro front-end always to the missing module until you hard update it, which we don't really want to do. We don't want to update the entire router config every time something fails to load. So what we do instead is we add a router guard, which tries to preload the module, and if it fails to load, we route to a different failure screen. So there we see the same load remote module function, and here we see routing to a different screen with a reference to where we were trying to go so that we get that nice little retry button, allowing us to continue on our merry way while the other team sorts out their problems. Now, an important thing to note is once this function returns the remote entry.js file, the browser caches it. So every time you make the call to get that file, like on your preload for your root, it's just going to return what the browser has cached. That's why I only saw the updates that Tori and Amy made when I refreshed the browser. Now, there are other frameworks that give us these nice things, not just Angular architects, one of them being NX Module Federation. This is a really cool one because when you're using an NX monorepo for all of your applications, it's very simple to just use the generator and generate static or dynamic Angular or React applications that work with Module Federation. It does obfuscate some of the sharing dependency stuff away from you, so you need to put in a little bit of extra work to expose that again to make it work with things outside of your NX monorepo. So what can go wrong? Pause. You know what I'm talking about. You're trying to retrieve an image from a different API. I don't know who you are. Trying to make a service call? No, not going to happen. Is it the second Thursday of May? Not today, buddy. So if your remote is using a CDN to retrieve images, for example, that CDN needs to allow for the origins of both your remote and your shell application, because your remote's going to be making requests from your shell domain when it's loaded up there. And remember to allow your remote through your content security policy. Not like this. This is bad. Ideally, it will be easy because everybody should be on the same enterprise domain, right? Because no one uses those auto-generated CloudFront URLs. And when you see this one, which you will, don't worry, you're not busy doing maths. All this means is that an application is trying to use a component that's been exported from a shared module, but not from that shared module's public API. This took a long time to figure out. And it also sometimes disguises itself as a cause error, so that's a little unfair. So why should we not be implementing Module Federation everywhere? Well, for starters, if you're a now 3-person team working on a small application, this is complete overkill. Like, don't do this. This is a solution for multiple large teams that need to work on one application that are distributed, because remember, you're scaling out. And with scaling out, with more applications, there comes more deployments, more infrastructure to manage, more pipelines to run, more change request forms to fill out. So you really need to be solving an existing problem. You can't just do something because it's cool. Because remember, Cardboard isn't free. Now, the Module Federation plugin has grown way beyond just Webpack and your normal client-side front ends. We now have, the usual suspects like Angular, React, Vue, Svelte, and then also server-side, Next.js. We can go crazy. You can now do Rust and WebAssembly as well. Why not just go ham? Build a React app and stick a Svelte app inside it next to an Angular app. There's a fantastic repository with basically any example you can imagine. And I really highly suggest going there and checking it out because your use case might just exist already. Now, that being said, if you have a big classroom, if you need to make a parent-friendly presentation, if you need to share resources, and if you have the budget for it, why not use Module Federation? You can have user experience and developer experience. No compromises. Which brings us to today. Now, we've implemented this in our new project, but we haven't gone to production yet. I'm sure we will. There's even been a couple jokes that will go to production once I leave the team. So what would be really nice is if you all went out and tried it for me, because statistically, you're going to get there before I am. So it's still 4 a.m. on a Sunday. Sadly, deployment hour hasn't changed. But now you're only 3 people on the call. You're getting ready to hit that button when you hear Adam say, "Hey, did you hear about the pot plant team? They had to roll back their deployment because of like some stupid button issue. I don't know, man. Must suck to be them." And then you hit the button. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
There's about 10 minutes for questions.
There goes my makeup. Do we have anything?
There's one.
Okay, we have one.
Go.
Does it have to be the shortest one?
Thank you. Yeah, that's loud. I just have a question with all these separate applications. How does that affect the load time of your front-end website, if at all?
So it doesn't, because the thing is, they're lazy loaded, right? So you're not going, oh, let me fetch everything immediately. You're only loading something once you need it. So it's actually really good. If you've already set up your application to be lazy loading all of your different modules in like an Angular context, it won't affect it at all. Like,
so yeah, there'll be a
the
separate
same.
load each component or application itself.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Sorry, that light's like right in the glasses, so I can't see if anybody else has any hands.
Can you guys with the questions sit closer together?
Sorry for making you run. So my front-end knowledge is questionable at best. So please bear with me. How difficult is this to implement in an existing front end? It sounds like a lot of the thinking around and the architecting around this requires it to be built very specifically with Module Federation in mind.
So it took us, I think, from reading the first blog article to getting it up and running. From our side, it took about a week. Please share any recommended articles. Please, thanks. I'll put my slides somewhere. I'll put it in the GitHub repository, and then you can find the repo link. I'll send it out in a tweet or something.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I was going to ask. Can I see your source code, please?
Yes, you can. The moment this is over, I'm open sourcing it so that anybody can go look at it. My API keys are not in there, so you can check the Git history. I made so sure.
So you showed some cryptic errors that you got when you were writing the demo. I just wanted to know, is that common with this technique that you're using? And will it get better? Or is it you just have to play with it, break it, and gain experience in it to actually run it in a production environment?
So I think there's only really the one cryptic error, and it's a common one. It's a very simple, it's not even a mistake to make. It's literally that if you're exporting something from an Angular module, but you're not exporting that component from the public API file itself, you'll get that weird, what is it, theta mod error. Don't know why, but if you see theta mod, you just go, oh, public API, and then you'll be fine. And that's probably the only issue we ran into. There was another one that did present as a cause error, which is when you make a typo when you're importing something. So you misspell the remote module name, but you can put a check in for that. We did do that so that we spit out a nice error instead of a cause error, because everything is suddenly caused when you're trying to pull in things from everywhere.
One behind you.
I've heard of Native Federation. What's that all about? That's new and special. Was that Jeff? I knew it was Jeff. Yeah, that's new and special. I haven't really played around with it. That's it. Yeah, next year. Oh, next week.